Apple, the world's most valuable brand, is headquartered in Cupertino, California. It began in Cupertino as well, in this building on April 1st, 1976. Before having an office building, Apple was born in this garage of Steve Jobs' parents in 1975. The Apple I was built in the garage by Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs worked together to market the Apple I. They first met while attending lectures at HP. Their common interest in personal computing turned them into partners. There was another co-founder, Ron Wayne. He designed the first Apple logo with Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree, but he left only 11 days after the founding of the company and later sold his 10% stake in Apple for $800. The Apple I board was released for sale in July 1976 for $666.66 each. Apple sold the company's first 50 machines to a dealer named The Buy Shop in Mountain View, California. The company was named Apple for Steve Jobs' favorite fruit and for inviting people to take a bite, B-Y-T-E, which sounds the same as bite, B-I-T-E. Also, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, said Steve Jobs, and the apple is something simple. Multimillionaire Mike Markula provided essential business expertise and funding of $250,000 during the incorporation of Apple. The Apple II, also invented by Steve Wozniak, was introduced on April 16, 1977. The second logo of Apple also came out in 1977, designed by Rob Janoff. Between September 1977 and September 1980, annual sales grew from $775,000 to $118 million, an average annual growth rate of 533%. The company introduced the Apple III in May 1980. On December 12, 1980, Apple went public at $22 per share. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh. Steve Jobs, John Sculley, who was CEO at the time, and Steve Wozniak were surrounded by reporters at the Macintosh launch event. Jobs and Sculley disagreed on the pricing of the Macintosh. Jobs thought Sculley set the price too high. That was just the start of the friction between them. More than 20 years later, Jobs looked back and publicly talked about his problems with Sculley.
Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out. When we did, our board of directors sided with him. And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out.
In 1985, Jobs resigned from Apple and founded Next, a company that would design and build high-end workstations. In the late 1980s, the Macintosh product line became increasingly expensive. Some customers turned to PCs for lower prices. In 1990, Apple introduced lower-cost models to increase sales. In 1991, Apple introduced the PowerBook with a design that set the current shape for modern laptops. However, by the mid-1990s, Apple was no longer a technological leader. The PowerBook 5300 was released in August 1995, but soon Apple had to recall the entire product line because one unit at an Apple employee's house and another at a factory caught fire while recharging. In the meantime, Windows 95 was taking market share away. Apple fought back by pushing low-cost performance, but that only disappointed fans. Apple posted a $740 million loss for the first quarter of 1996. To save Apple, then CEO Gil Amelio decided to bring Steve Jobs back by acquiring Next for $429 million. So Jobs joined Amelio on stage at January 1997's Macworld Expo. In August 1997, Jobs took the stage at another Macworld Expo and announced a $150 million investment from Microsoft. In November 1997, Apple announced 2 new products as well as the establishment of the Apple Store, which became the 3rd largest e-commerce site within a week. In May 1998, Apple launched the iMac, which sold 800,000 units in its first 5 months. Ken Siegel came up with the name iMac, with the I for the Internet. According to Apple, the I also stands for individuality and innovation. For fiscal 1998, Apple logged earnings of $309 million on $5.94 billion revenue, marking the company's first profitable year since 1995. In 1999, Apple introduced the iBook, trying to replicate the iMac's success in laptops. On May 19, 2001, Apple opened its first brick-and-mortar stores in Virginia and California. Also in 2001, Apple introduced the iPod. In April 2003, Apple opened up the iTunes Music Store with a new business model of 99 cents per song. In the first year alone, the iTunes Music Store sold more than 70 million songs. It had a 70% market share among all legal online music download services. In June 2005, Stanford University invited Steve Jobs to give a commencement speech.
Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Stay hungry, stay foolish. And I have always wished that for myself. And now, as you graduate to begin anew, I wish that for you. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thank you all very much.
In January 2006, the Intel-based iMac and MacBook Pro were introduced. The Intel processors enable users to install Windows on the Mac for the first time. In April 2006, Steve Jobs went to the Cupertino City Council to present his plan for a new Apple campus.
We've actually gone ahead and acquired all of this land. And it's basically the land that's on 280 and Prune Ridge and Tantau, that piece of land right across the street from I think it's the 100-acre HP parcel. And it's got buildings on it. It's already zoned commercial. Our plan is to basically take down all the buildings and put up some more efficient structures and a campus, basically, build something nice. So we're pretty delighted. I mean, we haven't started designing anything yet, and it'll take us, 3-4 years to design it and get all the approvals and get it built and stuff. And when we're done, we plan to use both campuses. We plan to keep the one we have and have a new one, and we will be able to hopefully fit all of our folks on both of them. And we're pretty thrilled, and I just wanted to tell you about it. And so we'll start a design process in the next few months to figure out what we're going to do, come up with some ideas. But I think we found a way to stay in Cupertino. And since we're your largest taxpayer, I thought you might be happy about it.
In May 2006, the flagship Apple Store opened in Midtown Manhattan and became a landmark in the city nicknamed the Big Apple. In January 2007, Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone at the Macworld Expo. The iPhone sold 1 million units in only 74 days. In 2009, Tim Cook was tapped as interim CEO while Steve Jobs took an extended medical leave. But Steve Jobs returned in time to introduce the iPad in January 2010. In 2011, during the last of his medical leaves, Jobs announced the iPad 2 in March and the iCloud service in June. On June 7, 2011, Jobs went to the Cupertino City Council again to present the detailed construction plan of Apple's second campus.
As Hewlett-Packard has been shrinking lately, they decided to sell that property, and we bought it. We bought that, and we bought some adjacent property. All used to be apricot trees, apricot orchards, and we've got about 150 acres. And we would like to put a new campus on that so that we can stay in Cupertino. And we've hired some great architects to work with, some of the best in the world, I think. And we've come up with a design that puts 12,000 people in one building. The campus we'd like to build there is one building that holds 12,000 people. And it's a pretty amazing building. Let me show it to you. It's a little like a spaceship landed. But there it is. And it's got this gorgeous courtyard in the middle, but a lot more. So let's take a closer look at it. It's got it's a circle. And so it's curved all the way around. As you know, if you build things, this is not the cheapest way to build something. There's not a straight piece of glass on this building. It's all curved, and we've used our experience in making retail buildings all over the world now. We know how to make the biggest pieces of glass in the world for architectural use. And we want to make the glass specifically for this building here. We can make it curved like this all the way around the building. And you can see what it will look like. It's pretty cool. Again, today, about 20% of the space is landscaping. Most of it is a big asphalt parking lot, several big asphalt parking lots. So 20% of it is landscape. We want to completely change this, and we want to make 80% of it landscape. Today, there are 3,700 trees on the property. We'd like to just almost double that. We've hired one of the senior arborists from Stanford, actually, who's very good with indigenous trees around this area. So we'd like to plant a lot of trees, including some apricot orchards. And this is some of the infrastructure. The main building, we have parking underneath the main building, and that's not enough, unfortunately, and we have a parking structure here as well. The building's 4 stories high, as is the parking structure, so there's nothing high here at all. We want the whole place human scale. It's actually about the same as what we have in Cupertino right now. And an energy center. We deal with people sitting at computers all day writing software. And if the power goes out on the grid, we get to send everybody home. So we have to have backup power to power the place in the event of brownouts and stuff. And I think what we're going to end up doing is making the energy center our primary source of power, because we can generate power with natural gas and other ways that can be cleaner and cheaper, and use the grid as our backup. And we think that makes more sense. We've got an auditorium because we put on presentations, much like we did yesterday, but we have to go to San Francisco to do them. And a fitness center and some R&D facilities. These are just things that where we do testing, and we need some buildings to test in, and there's hardly any people in them. So this is roughly the kind of thing that we're thinking about. And so I think the overall feeling of the place is going to be a zillion times better than it is now with all the asphalt. And the building footprint actually goes down by 30%. So we want to take the space and in many cases making it smaller or putting more of a desirable thing on the space. And that's what we'd like to do.
Unfortunately, he didn't get to see the completion of the new campus. He passed away on October 5th, 2011. Countless people came from all over the world to pay tribute to him. The Cupertino City Channel produced a short video in memory of him. After the passing of Steve Jobs, Apple continued growing. On October 15, 2013, the Cupertino City Council approved the Apple Campus 2 project.
Motion carries unanimously.
Did we get on?
We're done.
We got it?
Yay! As a 44-year resident of the city of Cupertino and somebody that worked over 20 years on the very site that we were discussing last night, it's particularly meaningful for me to be here this morning to celebrate really the culmination of a very long and great relationship between Apple and the city of Cupertino.
Cupertino is Apple's home. We love Cupertino. We're very proud to be here, and we're thrilled that Apple Campus 2 will be a part of Cupertino. We're going to build the best office building ever built in the world, and we're going to put it in a 100-acre park, returning the site to its natural beauty. It will be a place for the best team in the industry to innovate for decades to come.
In 2015, Apple created its highest annual sales record, and the company had the most profitable quarter in American history. In July 2016, Apple announced the sale of its 1 billionth iPhone. Apple sales reached an all-time high in the final 3 months of 2016. Revenue hit $78.4 billion for the quarter. Apple, born in Cupertino, thriving in Cupertino, always the pride and joy of Cupertino.